There's a strange thing that happens to people who've endured more than most. They don't talk about it much. They don't wear it like a badge. But if you look closely, you'll notice something unusual in the way they move through the world. They're calm in chaos, silent in crowds, and deeply, almost unnervingly aware of things others miss entirely. Most people think this is damage, but what if it's actually rewiring? You see, when someone goes through repeated trauma, loss, or emotional overload, their brain doesn't just break, it adapts, and that adaptation changes everything. The way you process threat, the way you read people, even the way you experience joy. Neuroscience has a term for this. It's called stress-induced neuroplasticity. And it doesn't just shape your mind, it rebuilds it. Let me explain what's actually happening inside your head. In 2019, researchers at McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical School conducted brain scans on individuals who had experienced chronic early life stress. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, had developed unusual patterns of hyperconnectivity. In other words, people who had been through too much didn't have damaged brains. They had hyperaware brains that were scanning, predicting, and preparing for danger at a level most people never reach. This is why you can walk into a room and immediately sense the tension. Why you notice the micro-expressions on someone's face before they've even finished their sentence. Why you feel exhausted in social settings that others find energizing. Your brain isn't overreacting. It's doing exactly what it was trained to do, survive. But here's where it gets complex. Because survival mode, when activated too early or too often, doesn't just stay in the background, it becomes your baseline. And that changes everything about how you connect with the world. Let's talk about attachment. In the 1950s, psychologist John Bowlby introduced attachment theory. The idea that the bonds we form in early life shape how we relate to others for the rest of our lives. Decades later, neuroscientists discovered something even more specific. When a child experiences inconsistent care, neglect, or emotional unpredictability, their brain begins to wire itself for hypervigilance. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, becomes overdeveloped. The hippocampus, responsible for memory and emotional regulation, can actually shrink in volume. What does this mean in real life? It means you remember everything. The tone someone used 3 years ago, the way they looked at you when you were vulnerable, the exact moment you realized you couldn't rely on them. Your memory isn't just good. It's forensic. And it's not because you're holding grudges. It's because your brain learned that forgetting could be dangerous. This is why people who've been through too much often seem distant, not cold. Just careful. They've learned on a neurological level that closeness costs something, and they're not willing to pay that price without knowing it's safe. But here's the part most people misunderstand. This isn't dysfunction. It's adaptation, and in some contexts, it's a profound advantage. A study published in 2016 by researchers at the University of California, Irvine examined something called post-traumatic growth. DAOR. They found that individuals who had experienced significant adversity showed heightened levels of empathy, purpose, and cognitive flexibility compared to control groups. In other words, going through too much didn't just make people cautious. It made them perceptive, resilient, dauntless, and deeply attuned to meaning. You don't just survive pain. You extract wisdom from it. You see patterns others miss. You understand people at a level that can't be taught. And you carry a kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself, because you've already proven it. To yourself, in the dark, when no one was watching. This is the hidden gift of enduring too much. You don't just know how to survive. You know how to see. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Loneliness. People who've been through repeated hardship often describe a peculiar kind of isolation. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't understand. You can be in a crowded room and feel like you're standing behind glass. You hear the conversation. You see the faces, But there's a barrier between you and the ease everyone else seems to have. Neuroscience explains this too. When your nervous system is stuck in a state of chronic activation, something called neuroception takes over. This term, coined by Dr. Stephen Porges as part of his polyvagal theory, refers to your brain's unconscious ability to detect safety or danger. For people who've been through too much, the threshold for safety is much, much higher. Your nervous system is constantly asking, is this person safe? Is this environment safe? Can I let my guard down? And most of the time, the answer is no. Not because people are dangerous, but because your system is wired to protect you from ever being blindsided again. This is why small talk feels exhausting. Why shallow relationships feel pointless. Why you'd rather be alone than pretend. It's not that you're incapable of connection. It's that you require a depth most people aren't willing to go to. And that's not a flaw. That's a standard. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Dopamine. Dopamine is the brain's reward chemical. It's released when you experience pleasure, novelty, or achievement. But here's the thing. In people who've experienced chronic stress or trauma, the dopamine system can become dysregulated. A 2020 study from King's College London found that individuals with a history of early adversity showed blunted dopamine responses to positive stimuli. Translation? Things that make other people happy don't always land the same way for you. This is why you might feel numb when good things happen. Why achievements feel hollow. Why you can't get excited about things that used to matter. It's not depression, necessarily. It's recalibration. Your brain has spent so long in survival mode that it doesn't quite know what to do with safety, with peace, with joy. But there's a flip side. When you do feel something, you feel it completely. The people who've been through too much don't experience life in pastel colors. They experience it in extremes. Deep grief, fierce loyalty, overwhelming gratitude for the smallest kindnesses. Your emotional range isn't broken. It's just operating on a different frequency. And then there's identity. When you go through too much, especially early in life, you don't just lose stability, you lose the narrative. The story of who you are gets interrupted, fractured, and you spend years, sometimes decades, trying to piece it back together. Psychologists call this identity disruption, and it's one of the most overlooked consequences of chronic adversity. You might feel like you're always becoming someone, but never arriving. Like you're watching your own life from the outside. Like the person you were supposed to be got lost somewhere along the way. This isn't confusion. It's reconstruction. You're not broken. You're building a self that can hold all of the contradictions. The pain and the strength. The fear and the courage. The fear and the courage. The scars and the beauty. A 2017 study from Northwestern University found that people who've experienced significant life disruption often develop what's called a redemptive narrative, a story in which suffering is transformed into meaning, and those who are able to construct this narrative show higher levels of psychological well-being and life satisfaction. In other words, the work you're doing to make sense of your past isn't just healing, it's creation. You're not recovering who you were. You're becoming who you were always capable of being. So what does all of this mean? It means that if you've been through too much, you're not less than. You're different. You see the world through a lens most people will never have. You carry a depth that can't be faked, a resilience that wasn't given. It was earned. In silence. In solitude. In moments no one will ever know about. You've been rewired by experience, and while that wiring makes some things harder, it makes other things possible. You don't need everyone to understand you. You just need the right people. The ones who've been there too. The ones who recognize the quiet in your eyes and know exactly what it cost. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to prove your strength. It's already there, in the way you survived. In the way you're survived, in the way you're still here, in the way you refuse to let what happened to you define what you're capable of. You've gone through too much, And somehow, against all odds, you've turned that into something unbreakable.